Hello, I'm Brad.
And I'm Jason.
You are listening to
Dice in Mind.
This is one of those episodes and interviews that we're going to conduct it. We're conducting it, but it's one that I love to go back and listen to myself because there's just such depth. So as I sit here and as we talk tonight, I have, even though it is evening our time, I've got my coffee as we talk about.
I've got my tea.
Yeah, interviewing Malcolm Sheppard from Green Ronin. Third time on the show with us. And this episode we're going to cover, and it's a two-parter. It's a two-parter because it's such good info.
I mean, we always go along with Malcolm, right? There's always something to talk about. But as you know, you all out there will hear that we kind of pivoted midpoint in the conversation. Okay, we probably pivoted a whole bunch of times, but we really pivoted midpoint because there were a number of things on your mind and my mind, and we really wanted to pick Malcolm's brain.
And it's funny because he's the one who actually, you'll hear us talk about the fact that he had someone coming over to watch Picard after the interview. So we all got talking before you even hit record, and he's the one that finally said, okay, we should probably hit record at some point. And we probably missed a good 5 to 10 minutes of good content just by us getting into it. Because we're comfortable chatting with each other after the third time. And so we went right into it, and there's all sorts of good material that we'll probably have to loop back around to.
And we would have gone longer. I mean, this could have easily been a 3-parter, but again, like you said, we and you'll hear this next episode, we were being diligent to get the man back to Star Trek, which is funny because we're not going to talk about Star Trek, believe it or not, at least at all in this episode, at least until the Jam Corner. But like with Malcolm, we've never really talked Trek. It's just he's like, hey guys, I've got a timeline, and then we just got it.
And there's so much to talk about. You and I played our first really we're kind of test running the modern age mechanic in context of a campaign that we are working on. I printed out, we both have the modern age core book.
Yep.
I printed out the quick starts for the Expanse, which is based off
ditto.
Age mechanic. I also printed out, I don't even think I even told you this, but I printed out the ones for Dragon Age and the Expanse as well.
Nice.
Just because I wanted to see, because the mechanic's so interesting, I wanted to see how they handle stunts and other things in the other games. And let's be honest, Dragon Age and Fantasy Age. Dragon Age was before Fantasy Age.
Yep.
So you can see the maturity and the morph and as the mechanic ages.
Right.
And you'll hear him talk about that in context with Fantasy Age Second Edition. He talks about things they learned from other games and how it was ready for a new edition. And many thanks to Troy Hewitt at Green Ronin for getting us some content and getting us some PDF copies of content.
Yeah, thank you very much, Troy. Yeah, that really helped us to get into it. I mean, you and I, Brad, have been talking obviously a lot offline, but as well as on Dice in Mind regarding our interest in modern age. That's where we are these days, and we've been jonesing to play. And like you said, we have a bit. We will more. And as we were getting into it, after that initial session, I know, and we'll talk about this a bit with Malcolm in a moment, but I started reflecting on, okay, what was the experience like? What seemed to work for us? What didn't? Well, I'll save it for the interview, but I guess I'll just summarize my bit here by thanking Malcolm again. He's become a true friend of the podcast. We've had many people these past almost 2 years. More
Yeah.
on that in the coming weeks. But we've had many people be very kind, very giving of their time, lovely people, fascinating people, really interesting creatives. But there have been just a few people who really feel like true friends, where it's like, hey, what do you guys need? And Malcolm, and to an extent, without question, Troy as well. So we are grateful and really delighted that we are in Green Ronin's corner, because man, they're a neat bunch of people, and they put out obviously some of the best gaming products out
great
there.
products, and I'm excited to see Fantasy Age 2. And we'll talk.
Yes.
I have some commentary on that, but let's go to the interview first after, and I'll talk about that when we are in the GM corner. So
that sounds
because
like a plan.
because he gives some good insight into what they're doing with second edition.
All right, let's go over there. Green Ronin developer at large, Malcolm Sheppard, has over 20 years of experience in the RPG industry as a writer, designer, and developer, starting with work on the Mage, the Ascension line for White Wolf. His other credits include work on Exalted, Shadowrun, Scion, Vampire the Masquerade, numerous Chronicles of Darkness titles, Blue Rose, and Fantasy Age. Now at Green Ronin, his work focuses on the modern Age RPG, along with other Age system works, though he's also developed Orc, the role-playing game, and performed writing and editing duties for the Sword Chronicle RPG. Malcolm lives in Ontario, Canada, and coaches historical fencing, rapiers, and longswords and such on the side.
We just hit the record button because we started talking, and then we realized that if we didn't hit record, we would have kept talking and missed probably an episode and a half worth of material.
Yes.
So we were last talking. So Malcolm, thanks again. You are
so much.
Yeah, you are. The smoking jacket is on the way as a 3-time guest in the show.
No, he's got to make it to 5.
Is it 5?
That's our criterion. That's how we get him back.
Okay,
but I mean, Malcolm, you've been so kind to spend so much time with us these past couple of years, and we can tell you know us a bit now because you were the one who's like, you guys have to start recording. which is a sign.
Yeah, we were just talking to all this stuff. This banter would be really great if other people
if we had recorded it. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and we have deadlines because there are shows to be watched this evening.
That's
we were
right.
just getting into the Green Vapor sex ghost from Star Trek and the Next Generation of yore.
Yeah. Thank you so much for adding Star Trek and not just letting that hang there on its own. Yeah.
Oh, I love Star Trek so much, and one of my disappointments as a writer game designer is I've never worked on that license. Right.
Oh.
Even when the guy who got me into the industry, Jesse Hainig, he was the lead for Decipher's Star Trek RPG.
Yeah.
But we never managed to make it work. He did, however, give me a D6 with Klingon numerals on it, which is useless, but I love it.
Okay, fair, but that's cool.
Yes. So kapla to Jesse Hainig, who actually works on, I think he is a narrative bigwig at Cryptic, working on Star Trek Online now.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. And he's a great guy. I'm just gonna waste your time praising him. He got me into the industry way back in the late 90s. Through a long series of communications through Usenet. That's how long.
Oh yeah, no.
Wow.
Yeah, we hear you.
Oh yeah, and we started corresponding, and he believed in me, and he kept giving me assignments, and it's because of him.
That's great, Malcolm.
That I have that role, and I try, and that kind of mentorship is so important. I just want to say, I know inside the industry right now, I think we've been kind of hurting for people who can do the volume of writing within the time necessary. And getting into that, it does require some mentorship. It does require a sense of what is generally expected. And I think as a community, what we have to do is certainly be mindful of that, and also widen who we're going to talk to, because of course, gaming has been dominated by the faces of people like me for a very long time. And if we don't, and it's not just a matter of hiring for diversity, it's also a matter of sharing that knowledge broadly, right? Yeah. So that people can take advantage of expanded opportunities. Anyway.
No, that's lovely. That's outstanding.
Yeah. I think, and that's an important point too. I think, we can tell just based off of living in other communities, based off of interest, the gaming community is becoming much more diverse, and it is much more of an open community. Still has ways to go, but it's so much further ahead than
and in just recent years, talk about a vanguard. And when you say diversity, I mean, we're not talking something real simple or monolithic. We're not talking binaries. I mean, we're seeing all kinds of diversity in every imaginable way. More and more, way out ahead of where the rest of society is and ought to be.
Oh, I don't even know how to approach that, because things are so different based on where you live and what your community is. And but the thing is we have common political engagement we have to make, where we can't let communities and people be stranded in these like cul-de-sacs of bigotry. Right. It's a much bigger topic than gaming, but it certainly applies to gaming, and it certainly applies to some of the resistance, I think, that we've seen to a few different things. Certainly there's been resistance to more diversity in creativity, in who's doing the work, but also in what's being talked about. Like, one of the things that was great working with Cthulhu Awakens, for example, is it is certainly a basic moral requirement to do your best to have a diverse creative team, and it's not something that should really be praiseworthy in of itself, right? Because it's obligatory. But at the same time, certainly a lot of the material in the setting, because one of the distinctive things with Cthulhu Awakens is that we treat the mythos as a specific game setting, right? With a timeline and events and organizations and things that are interactable, that can be interacted with across time. And, that involves everybody in the setting, right? And there are many things that I would never think about. Like, one of our authors came up with the idea of Misty Valley Junior College, which is in Arkham, is an institution that was founded using the HBCU model, historically Black University model, right?
Oh, that's cool.
So which I never would have thought of, because I'm a white guy, and I'm a white guy who lives in Canada, where we don't have that kind of tradition, right? Not to say that we don't have extremely similar social pressures and problems, right? It's just that there isn't that historical arc, right, that could be drawn on, right? So a lot of things like that, right, that make our worlds more real, right? Because reality includes more people than just us, or just the people, who look like you, act like you. So I think we have to, this is going to sound pretentious, I think we have to get away from the notion that we're doing anybody a favor. Right? Because there seems to be that kind of vibe, and a lot of the time, and get more into the idea that, like, this is selfish good practice, right? Right, it's what we want because we get better stuff out of it. Right? And I certainly think that's that's the case with Cthulhu Awakens. As I told you before the show, I'm not really involved with any of the 5th season stuff. Aside from maybe some little bits and bobs of design that have sort of leaked through some of the various Age things we've done. But, that is something that is certainly baked in to that as well, right? It is obligatory and necessary to get to bring out the setting, to give it its, maximally faithful 3-dimensional rendition.
I also, though, I see a great deal of that. Again, I'm looking with a lens, but of my own. But I see a great deal of that in the material for the Expanse RPG, to a lesser extent, but nonetheless still very present in Modern Age. I mean, I think in that regard, Green Ronin certainly doesn't go around tooting its horn on some of these things like some other companies, and we've talked about this with you in the past. But at the same time, I think it's clearly there in the material, and increasingly so, especially in contradistinction to some others.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me, actually, one thing that makes me very sad when I think about Modern Age is one person who was very integral to Modern Age, was a very important Mexican RPG designer, Alex Melchor. And he was fantastic. He was just fantastic. And he passed away suddenly a few years ago. The last thing that he worked on with us was Threefold. But he was with us for the Modern Age core book and pretty much everything up to that point. He's a fantastic game designer. Just fantastic. But I think because of where he was from, when he passed, he didn't really get the notice that it has when it's happened to to other figures in the industry. And I miss him.
But his DNA, you said, just based off of what you're saying, is obviously his DNA is in the game.
Yes,
right?
Yes. He worked on a lot of very fundamental systems to Modern Age, specifically talents, a lot of the variations in the core game engine, large numbers, like probably the majority of stuff with that, and rules options in the Modern Age Companion, the chapter on modifying adversaries in Enemies and Allies, a bunch of stuff. A bunch of stuff that was very... The tone was his tone. He really knew how to present things to support a way of doing things, right? He also worked on worked on the GMing section, about half the GMing section in Modern Age.
Wow.
But he had a good way of making you feel enthusiastic in a way where you felt you were the one being enthusiastic and you weren't being pushed, right? He had a very subtle style that made you want to do things, but made you think it was your idea, which is the best way to do it.
Those are the creative people that I've seen. I've seen that with other people. They never will get the credit they deserve, but their credit is in the people like you who continue to do that work and treat others fairly. Like, you know what I mean? So,
well, everybody tries their best. Well, if they're good.
Hey, I was going to mention too, because there were two things I wanted to talk a bit about Fantasy Age, and then a little bit about a lot of the open license discussions we're having. But I just wanted to mention, so Jason and I have
you beat me to it.
We decided to use, we mentioned this to Troy, who's with Green Ronin, that we're writing now. I'm air quoting a lot of this for those that are not able to see, which is everybody listening.
Writing is a very strong word. As someone who writes a lot, I would say we are playing and fumbling our way through a moon-based world using the modern.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks. It's something that's been on my mind since high school, which is sad. I don't if
it's not sad.
Well, thank you. That's true. You brought up Usenet. What am I saying?
Yeah.
It's the like no moon related stuff is actually like there's like some of the very first like big fantasy works, like things that have sometimes been cited as the first works of science fiction.
Yeah.
They have to do with going to the moon.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, and it is one of those things where, you know, we kind of lost the hold of that tradition once we knew what was on the moon.
Well, yes, but I have wanted to play.
You pulled out notes.
I had
from
wanted,
1993.
Yeah, I did. I wanted to play in Ben Bova's Welcome to Moonbase since that book was new, and in fact, I still have my copy. I found a second copy at a used book sale for a
Since a
buck.
Ben Bova book was new, my God.
Yeah, well, this is what I'm saying. This is, I mean, most of the Bova books most of them I read while they were new, which fortunately you could still do up until just a few years ago. But anyways, we've been playing with Modern Age, and we have become, I think, increasingly enamored with the mechanics, and I'm really taken by the cleverness of the stunt system. Granted, we did it wrong when Brad and I were playing the other day, but still, just the learning curve around it and starting to get a feel for how this works. Also, we discovered that playing gritty gets a lot of butts kicked, basically mine. But still, I was not prepared for that, actually. I think we've got to switch it to cinematic. But
I play Modern Age regularly. I don't actually, for the past 2 years, I haven't been running it. I've been playing in games other people have been running. You know, I did a year of a threefold campaign run by a friend of mine, and now we're doing a cyberpunk fantasy game, and in both of those we're doing it in pulpy, and we tend to find you know, while there are pros and cons of each and every mode, we tend to find that pulpy is the one that is the right speed for most of the games that we do. But yeah, gritty is for when you really want to have one combat per adventure.
No, but this is encouraging because like Brad, you and I have texted a little bit about this, but when we started playing, I walked away from the first session, and it's like, okay, I love a lot of this, but it just wasn't sitting right with me. Like my character, granted, my character is not optimized for the adventure we chose, but still, it's like, this is so hard, and I didn't expect it to be quite this different success-wise from other mechanics. And then when I started realizing, wait, we chose the gritty approach, and this might not be the right mode for what we're designing. So your feedback about pulpy, maybe that's what we need to check out to find a balance. Yeah.
But what I have found and Jason and I are learning games as we go, as we do this, and and we've changed the schedule of the podcast just so we have more time.
Yeah.
I found the way the Modern Age guide was written, the way that the quick start was written, and I used material from the Expanse, not the threefold, not the threefold Modern Age, but the Expanse quick start. It made it very fast. To get up and moving on a game. There was not
readable.
I'm using business terms. There was not a lot of overhead. In terms of getting the run.
I'll tell you my secret. I hate session 0. I hate session 0. I hate the rise of session 0 as obligatory. Because I see so many games fail at session 0. Right? They fail, or they turn into really kind of chatty metagaming that eventually peters out, or things like that. I want to play as soon as we decide to play. We make characters and then we go. Right? That's what I want. So, I mean, I don't always get that wish. Usually I don't get that wish.
Right.
But I like it. I like it so that that stuff can just get done, right? And the same with advancement and stuff like that. I like it to be very painless, right? And I love the dividends that being annoyed with that has paid, because I know for our modern age game, usually when we have character improvements and things to do, like when everybody levels, right? It's never going to take more than half of one of our 3-hour sessions, right?
Wow.
We do 3 hours, right?
Well, but that's a fast level.
Yeah. So, we hem and haw about it, but as long as everybody has the book in front of them, right?
Right.
Well, we have, like, that is the beauty of having levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people are very disoriented at times with the idea of having a game that can have a realistic kind of mode in gritty, but also has levels.
Yeah, I was a little surprised at that.
But okay, so the way levels, the function that levels have is they make you develop your character in a balanced way, right?
Right.
Because you can't do two things in a row, level by level, in a bunch of ways. And like, you can't do 2 ability increases in a row, right?
Right.
And you get a specific package of stuff, right? You get an ability increase, you get an ability advancement, a talent advancement, sometimes you get a specialization advancement, right? So because you get that stuff, right, there isn't the, like, I'm a master of the sword, but I can't talk to people, right? Which you get in the more point-based approach. And I think people have kind of come to associate realism with, I can develop my character in any way I want, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how many of us have that kind of control over our lives? Like, I know we're fans when we play RPGs, but still, we have you have to compel. There's a certain degree where it's useful to compel the player to make to use a variety of choices, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to make it too strong, because you do want people to be able to reach their goals. But you kind of want to do that, and packaging it level by level is just the easiest way to do it, right? You gain a level, you gain all of these advancements, diverse set of choices is required, and then you move on to the next, right? So but I think people are so used to it, meaning that my hero is even more heroic because of Dungeons and Dragons, and because of fantasy games in that tradition, including Fantasy Age, in fact.
I will say that it was by far the fastest character generation I have experienced in any game. I mean, Brad, you and I sat down and literally it took me like 2 weeks to come up with the name for my PC, and that was after we generated the character. That was on me. But the generation of that character, I had that sheet filled. I mean, that was just boom, 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 boom.
And that was
just picking up the book for the first time and going through it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say there wasn't a prep before that. It was literally
a lot of that is on Steve Kenson, because he worked on that chapter, and yes, the way he broke down background and profession, it was just fantastic. And really there's a decent selection that is broad, but not so broad that you have decision paralysis, right?
Right.
So we were very lucky to kind of have it balanced in that way. And of course, at the same time, while we were doing that, we were prototyping the Expanse, right? Because the modern age system kind of also acted as our, test bed for a lot of the things that go into the Expanse, which of course Steve helmed. So there was that kind of synergy where he got to bring all of that stuff. And perhaps he had some notions that he was thinking of for the Expanse coming into modern age. So it all kind of works together that way, in-house.
If we thematically go back in time, what, if anything, can you tell us about Fantasy Age? Because there's an update coming to that.
Well, I was just gonna say, as we move over, what was the thought process behind doing Fantasy Age 2?
Well,
second edition.
Yeah.
Well, we knew we needed to do one, because Fantasy Age was getting a little long in the tooth, and beyond the natural desire to have a current version of a game so that people will buy it,
Absolutely.
we also went through developing, several other age-based games, right? And we had lessons that we learned from long-term play of Fantasy Age, and we had all these new systems, and all these variations on systems, right? So it just became, it was the right time to start. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit. It's going to be a lot of that in stories like this. And that kind of went through it, and of course, a few other things happened, but now we are so close. Just lining up the remaining bells and whistles, and there are so many new things. I did quite a bit of design and development work on the game.
Neat.
Under Owen Casey Stevens, and then Ian Lemke, and of course, Chris Pramus, who is the creator of the Age system. He was always in there with, well, this was the intention of this system, and a lot of the time I have a tendency to overcomplicate things a little. So he helped kind of pull me back, because I get really interested in the mechanic as a mechanic, right? So I'm like, oh, we could do all these things, and we could unify damage and degree of success, and like all we have to do is tear the entire system down and build it up from first, or we could not do that. But there are a couple of things in there that I've done that I'm kind of proud of, and one of those is in the new Fantasy Age, we have a little more of a narrative approach to defeat. So
interesting.
We've added conditions to the game, though we've tried to keep them to a minimum, because conditions can kind of multiply and become confusing if you lean into that too much. But one of the opportunities that created is that, well, what does it actually mean if you're dying? Well, that's kind of a condition, isn't it? Right? Well, can't we have conditions other than dying for when you're down at 0 health, right?
Yeah.
So we have other conditions. We have basically tree of 3 defeat conditions that happen when you get dropped. And those are dying, unconscious, and helpless, right? Unconscious is pretty self-explanatory. Helpless is just you are beaten down, and that is used for people who are just, out wrestled or exhaust, or you exhaust them or whatever.
Nice.
Right? That's the condition you use when you want to slap the cuffs on someone, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that provides so many more opportunities for, yield, you're in prison scenario, right? Or people who don't want to like kill their enemies, or enemies who don't want to kill you, right? And it leans into a little more of the abstractions that we can take advantage of when we systematize things like how tough you are. We have an option to use fortune from the Expanse that's built in there. It's not core to the game, but you can use it if you want. The same with if people are familiar with the churn. That is, the more you succeed, the tougher things get. Meta mechanic in the Expanse.
Okay.
We have a version. We have a similar narrative control mechanic in the Modern Age Companion, right? And so that has been added as a system called Peril.
Nice. Not to make fun of this the other way around. A lot of what you're describing, I mean, and I think this is one of the reasons why we've become rather taken with Modern Age and just the age mechanic in general, but a lot of what you're describing, Malcolm, honestly better simulates real life in a game, like the notion like churn, right? I'm sorry, but as the more successful you get, the harder things become. I mean, you're and getting beaten down but still being able to walk away. I mean, you're describing real life a better replication.
It's I avoid thinking in terms of reality, because reality, especially when it comes, especially when it crosses over with violence, is so weird.
Yeah.
So I actually have another kind of job, and in that job, I teach historical fencing. Right, I teach people how to fight with longswords and rapiers, and I teach people how to wrestle the way they did in the late Middle Ages, and fight with knives and daggers and all of those things, right? And we have blunted steel weapons, and we whack each other at high speeds, right? And one of the most common things that happens, for example, is that you kill each other, right? Because each of you sees the other person preparing, and you just right, and it happens a whole lot, right?
Interesting.
So you have so many weird things and accidents happen that in some ways RPG systems are kind of reassuring, because they make violence make more sense than it actually does.
Interesting.
Right? It removes some of the absurd elements and prolongs some aspects, because of course, nobody has enough hit points to resist being chopped in the side with a sword ever.
Right.
It creates all these affordances, but at the same time, traditionally, role-playing game mechanics, and this is certainly by no means true anymore, but the roots of RPG mechanics were in wargaming, and it abstracted what happens to a unit down to an individual, and things were still thought about in terms of hits, which is abstractly what weapons are doing, right? And not so concerned with what happens to the soldier, right? Because of course, in old war games, you might say, oh, if you really want to know, this percentage flee the field and this percentage are dead, right?
Yeah.
But once we render things down to an individual, we need finer grained results, and to represent that reality, and also to represent the psychological reality of violence, because that's something that especially comes up. I kind of wish I'd done this in Modern Age really first, because you just can't go shooting people all the time,
right,
or cutting them, or it's bad for you. Certainly it's bad for them. And people notice. And I think one of the things is that often we also have the illusion that things that happen in fantasy games, to get back to Fantasy Age, happen outside of a social context, because we have a loose sense of the fantasy world, which is a wilderness with the odd town.
Right.
And there are monsters, and basically, and video games teach us, you can kill whoever you want unless you're zoned into the town, and then you meet invincible guards or something, right? So we want to do better than that, because the opportunity that tabletop role-playing games give us is that we have the intelligent narrative control of a human being who can think of things other than killing to solve problems. So so we want the mechanics to reflect those opportunities, and certainly we are far from the first game to do this, but it is a nice thing to add to something that is definitely in the traditional fantasy adventure format, right? Because if you look at the leaders, like, it's not so prevalent in, say, D&D and Pathfinder, right? So and certainly we are in that trad fantasy tradition, so we want to add something to it.
That's what I was going to say. I don't, and again, never any disrespect to other games. I think that's where a game like Blue Rose, for example, you kind of, whether you want to use the term cutting edge or not, you're continuing to find these areas to improve. That, let's say it's not reality, but for Jason and I, who love the idea of a mechanic that can bring, especially when we're talking like in a moon-based environment,
a little bit into it,
a little bit into it, that gives it kind of some people like the real life feel, some people like that total fantasy feel. You're giving them the option to go even out.
Yeah. So you're reminding me of kind of For All Mankind. I've been binging that. I got I got 3 free months of Apple TV when I bought this.
Oh.
I bought this giant monster television. And it is one of the things that is constantly coming up is that like you can't have stupid fights because everybody is in danger all the time because they're on the moon or they're on Mars, right? Or they're in space, right? And it is one thing that, you know, heading back to Star Trek, I always appreciated about Star Trek The Next Generation is that people aren't yelling at each other and pushing each other around for drama, right? They're essentially professionals who know that they live inside an extremely complex machine. And if they don't get their act together, everybody's going to die. So, so you don't do that, right? You behave professionally toward one another. And when you have these conflicts, right, you have to have things other than lethality. And of course, that brings us to what Blue Rose has to give the age system, which is relationship bonds, which, you know, I have made so much use of relationships and abstracted into other types of bonds in my designs for age. Certainly, Trojan War does that, right? Where you have bonds related to how much a god likes you. And Cthulhu Awakens, that's how we do... that's how we do the psychic effects of the mythos on you. You gain a bond, right?
Interesting. Okay.
And that bond can be spent to, you know, you can spend points from that bond to do things like, well, this thing notices that, you know, since your mind has been broken by Haster and it's a minion of Haster, it's not going to bother you because now it thinks you're on the same team, right?
Interesting.
But on the other hand, sometimes those points bond points can also be used against you, right? Where, you know, you might have a break with reality, right? And that way, and in that case, the GM spends the bond point.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how we do alienation, which is our, you know, psychic erosion system in the game.
What's just out of curiosity, because I haven't looked for a while. I've been jammed up. What's the kind of the ETA? When do you think Awakens is going to kind of come out for general sale for those that maybe weren't backing it? You know?
We're running a little late, so I can't tell you right now for 2 reasons. The first reason is that we are still doing some art approvals because Cthulhu Awakens has so much art. And one of the things too is we wanted it not to look like too much like other Mythos games, right? For example, we have a very distinct appearance that we give the big C itself compared to other games. And that hasn't been unveiled yet. But that involves, you know, lots of back and forth with other artists. And the other reason is that Fantasy Age is getting so close now. That we kind of have to get it. But we are looking at ways for backers. We are
that's good.
looking at ways to sort of give them an extra little thanks for their patience.
Right.
But I would say definitely second half of the year, everybody will be able to get it.
I can't wait for us to publish the second half of this interview just based off of how much we got with how much Malcolm was able to share and talk about Age Mechanic and Fantasy Age 2 and us getting into talking about our game that, you know, not our game, that's the wrong word, our campaign we're developing.
Let's be honest. Hold on. You keep using the term campaign.
I don't know what else to call it.
How about honestly, how about our adventure, which may be comprised of one or more sessions?
Okay, there we go. We'll call it the adventure.
A campaign, I think, is overselling what we might be after. I mean, we want to play a campaign, but it hasn't happened before.
Well, and it's going to be in space, and the working title is Journey to the Center of Uranus.
There it is, folks. There it is. Yes. The unknown.
I wanted to see your reaction.
unknown book.
You didn't hit stop and make us record it. So
the unknown book from Jules Verne, right? He started with the moon and then just kept going inward. All right, but let's go.
I am excited to see second edition Fantasy Age 2 come out.
Yeah.
And why I say that for a couple of reasons. One, we none of us have anything negative to say about anything that's been going on in the RPG world related to the open licensing issues and all of that. But I think that Fantasy Age 2 has real potential to be a solid high fantasy adventure RPG that you can put up against
as an alternative to
the
D&D.
Other as an alternative in the market, whether if you don't want to necessarily go down the D&D or the Pathfinder path.
Right.
I really think that Fantasy Age first edition can do that. I think second edition is isn't even going to be better and potentially doing something that we've talked about, and that is this could open up all this discussion and everything could have a positive effect and just open up all sorts of new opportunities for gaming companies all over. And it'll even help potentially bring in other new people into gaming.
That's right.
Benefit even those that like D&D and Pathfinder, which are let's be honest, D&D is the big name on the market.
And I mean, we're going to continue playing D&D, right? Earlier this evening, I texted you.
I don't have this library. I don't have this library of books just to look at.
Don't you?
No, I do, but I intend on gaming them. So.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I texted you and our friend Dr. Aaron Peterson from previous episodes about we need to start because he's never played, he's never role played, so it's time to correct that oversight, and we're gonna start him out on D&D because, like you said, because it's the biggest one, and though I mean. I do have some second thoughts about that, to be honest. So I know maybe we'll revisit that, but either way, we'll probably start them out on D&D. But that's independent of what you're saying, that Fantasy Age and the second edition of Fantasy Age will be really compelling options for, you want to do something high fantasy, but you don't necessarily want to play D&D, or you want to do something like that, but you don't necessarily want to use a D20, right? Different dice mechanics hit the sweet spots for different purposes and different people.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think, all of them were this way, but as you go through and look at, and I have, going back to True 20, I have the True 20 materials, I have the materials for Dragon Age. That's when I found out about Fantasy Age. Malcolm, I believe, introduced us. I don't think I had jumped on them. I didn't know about Modern Age before we met him the first time. Maybe I did.
No, I think that's right, because I remember how into that you got, and quickly.
Yeah, I just and just looking through, the basic rule book as Fantasy Age and the quick start guides, and we really used the quick start more than anything to get started. And I think I said this, the quick start guide allowed us to skip right over session 0, something Malcolm isn't a big fan of. That made me think. Yeah. But we didn't have to really do a session 0. We did, I think, kind of like
we did because but our session 0 was an hour over Zoom, and we were taking our time and talking about it.
Oh yeah, we were talking about. It wasn't so much an educational component. It was more of us deciding on, character names, character types.
Yep. Yeah.
What did we want to play? It was
all character development. It wasn't mechanics. Yeah.
Yeah, I would argue and say we probably only spent about 30 minutes doing.
Yeah, prep. I think that's right. And no, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say what stood out to me. No, go for it.
No, I'm going to pause. I'm going to hold my hands up. You go ahead.
No, I think because we brought this up with Malcolm, and it was helpful hearing his feedback that we went, as we said in the interview, we went gritty in terms of the approach, right? Not pulpy, not cinematic. And I thought about that for a while after we played, and his recommendation, aim for pulpy. Pulpy tends to be a sweet spot for a lot of games. I mean, don't you think that's how we're gonna go with session 2?
Yeah. I still find the idea of having the option to take one of those 3 paths, just as it being part of the rules. Interesting. That is interesting and unique to me. Now, granted, we don't have the breadth of knowledge of all games out there that some have, but amongst our cadre of games that we've played or read about, I think it's fascinating for us to have a discussion. Well, if it's gritty, one shot and you're likely dead. If it's cinematic, it's like the stormtroopers pew pew, nobody gets hit ever. Or do you have something in the middle?
Droids, right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, and it makes sense because as Malcolm said, modern age. Modern age, the system, but modern age was developed as a generic core rule book, right? And so and modern age as the age mechanic has been used across Green Ronin's games, and so you have to have everything from Call of Cthulhu up to Pew Pew.
Well, no, not Call of Cthulhu.
Oh, sorry,
Cthulhu
Awakens. Sorry, you can tell I've never played. You have everything from Cthulhu to Pew Pew, right? And those different genres call for more or less approximation of real life when being accosted. But that was the other thing that Malcolm said about how he doesn't want to design games where people are simply in combat because it's so far from real life. That was a real surprise to me from a game developer like him.
Well, I think you can see it in the DNA. You can especially see it in the DNA with Modern Age. Just by the very fact that the system really fits, and I'm talking a little cryptically here, it fits kind of the adventure genre that we are looking to build, which is not space battles and so on, or even looking at the Expanse. Not everything in Expanse, and you and I have become a fan of talking about this. A lot of people like Pew Pew games. I get it. That's cool.
Me too.
But there's also a narrative and a story building component that even going back to you and I playing one-on-one with D&D, I went overboard with. You
heard it here first. It's taken almost 2 years, but you heard it here first.
Yeah. I've always said that there was I've always said that I took a real cerebral approach, and at the expense, without really thinking about it, of combat. And what we're talking about in building our adventure and all that within the modern age is you don't necessarily have to have combat to have a really great adventure. The other thing I found fascinating is, Malcolm was talking about sitting down with the dev teams, and someone was asking about whether they've seen this, and he's like, "Oh, go look at the Fantasy Age book."
I know that's something.
They have such a plethora and an encyclopedia. I don't even know if encyclopedia is the term. A library, full-on library of material that they can leverage. They can leverage from Expanse.
Well, it's from it's like
they can leverage.
It's a huge canon now, and what's so impressive is it's partially agnostic to genre, so they can they can dip in and out across Dragon Age, Fantasy Age, Modern Age, the Expanse, where there are important differences, but they're not core differences. That's just slick.
Yeah, I'm really excited about what we talked about for this episode. It's going to get really cool in the next episode. Lots of cool stuff to talk about. I'm ready to, even with all the job changes and stuff I'm going through, I'm ready to plop down some cash when those books come out. So when fantasy,
I'm shocked. Yeah.
Yeah, I know you are.
I appreciate how you're whispering into the microphone.
That wasn't whispering. That was talking softly.
Yes, that was your. But I appreciate how you're doing that as this then goes out literally to the world. But it's okay. Your wife is.
But let's be honest. But no. Let's be honest. If she didn't hear it right at this very moment,
then you're fine.
She's never going to hear it.
That's right. And she's never going to hear it. Yeah. No.
So, but I think as a side.
Yep.
Related to this, and just this was something that popped in my head because we talked about it. With us having kids, I've already told my kids that this material, this podcast, is as much for you and I to have fun as it is out there for people who are interested in listening to it. And it is selfishly self-serving for us to be able to talk to people who have built these games like Malcolm did.
Oh yeah,
and who was part of a team and who
absolutely.
And so for me, I get excited like holiday Christmas morning excited when we get to talk to someone who has been a writer in a book that I have read and used, and that goes even to the novelists and the writers that we've read otherwise.
Yeah, without question, strongly agree.
Yeah, and for our kids, someday when, potentially I'm gone, we're gone years and years from now,
they'll have the chance to not listen to these as well.
Yeah, if you want to know how nerdy your grandpa was, all you got to do is listen to this podcast. You'll be able to hear it and see. That was when they actually used to play games and they use these things called pencils.
Yeah, I wonder if 2 generations from now the term hard pass will still be in use.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. It actually will probably be abbreviated in some form, like Klingon will be
HP. Right,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's probably true.
So as we move over to the GM corner, I'm going to stop saying what's on our desk because a lot of times we talk about stuff that isn't even on our desk. So what have you been watching or working on over the past 2 weeks?
I mean, there's a lot going on, but the one that comes to mind, and I think is especially relevant given the interview, I have started reading Jemison's The 5th Season. I've only had it for a day or two, about a day as we record this, and I'm only about to start the second of the 23 chapters, but that's how books start. You got to start at the beginning. I continue to be amazed every time they talk about the stillness, of how reminiscent it is of your vastness from our D&D adventure campaign in that regard. So not really, but sort of. Just your world building. And I've just begun reading the book. It's well written. It's written very differently than most of what I read. I mean, our listeners probably know this already, but I tend to read primarily nonfiction. When I do read fiction, it is overwhelmingly science fiction. I decided to read the 5th season, well, honestly, because Green Ronin has just been pushing out the upcoming game so much. Between that and the connection with your world building, Brad, it's like, okay, you know what? I have to try this. I have to read this. And I recognize that it kind of dances it's kind of like sci fantasy, if you will. I get that from what I've read about it. But it's very interesting. And I'll just close this by saying, the more I am slowly learning about the stillness, the more I'm impressed with your vastness. No jokes intended, right? Just your world building. I'm curious to see where this goes. It's written it's written very differently than I'm used to. But I mean, Jemison won a Hugo for each of the books in the trilogy. I mean, wowie wow. So that's what's on my desk, as it were. How about you?
Well, before we do that, I gotta ask, because you bring up, and this isn't a joke. I'm literally thinking back. I don't know every book you've read, but I don't remember us talking about a fiction book that you've read that isn't sci fantasy in some form or another. I'm trying to think of what other fiction you might have
that read. Isn't science that wasn't science fiction or fantasy.
Yeah.
There are. I'm just looking at
Lord of the Rings. We read a while back.
That's fantasy. That's high fantasy. Yeah. I mean, I'm looking over here. I've got. I'm just
drawing a blank.
No, because I've got a few. I've read a few by Garrison Keillor and Lake Wobegon. I've read the entire Rabbi Sachs series, courtesy of my dad, who gave me his copies, or long-term lent them. There are.
Okay, it's just something we haven't.
No, there are very.
We get so
few.
into.
Yeah.
We get so into talking about sci-fi fantasy, and then you and I have.
All of our
lots of other discussions that we don't talk about on here, but
because my problem is, so like, how a lot of fiction is about like stories about how people develop.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care, so that just doesn't hold me.
Is that because of your educational background, or
you hoped out, given I'm a licensed psychologist, but that probably should have been.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Because you are a clinician, I can't imagine fictional human development isn't something that's your shtick.
It's not. I will. Oh, see, nope, that's fantasy. I was going to recommend Terry Pratchett. So no. It just has never, even as a kid, it's just fiction, and I have nothing but respect for fiction and fiction writers. That's the typical author, but it just never. Mm-hmm. It rarely holds me. So.
Well, your taste is no indictment of any individual writer itself. It's just personal preference.
Yeah.
So, and the same thing with me. If I look at my shelves now, I do read a lot of biographies.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of if I'm not reading fiction, that's one of the genres. I don't read as much nonfiction as you do. It goes in spurts. There are certain themes, economics, leadership, process building, and time management. Those are nonfiction subject areas that I'm interested in. For me on my desk, I am, as we've talked about offline, the written word is going to be increasingly important for us. And the preparation for launch of that has taken up a chunk of my time. So, and because I'm in between professions right now in terms of positions, I have a lot more time and a lot less stress than I've had before. So I've had to try to focus and not put too much on my plate.
Yeah, good.
So I'm not doing a lot of reading right now.
Yep.
Of fiction or nonfiction. I have 2 books that I need to read that we've talked about in the past. Star Wars and Conflict Resolution, and another one that I just haven't gotten to.
Yeah.
But I did get recently the latest one of the latest books on the Expanse RPG.
Yes, that's right.
And I've kind of been putzing around with that a little bit, but honestly, between the stuff we're prepping for our written word launch, and I've been doing a lot of, I don't want to say music therapy, because that's actually a profession I know people are in. I'm using music as therapy to relax.
Yeah, which is wonderful. Yeah.
So between those 2 things and the podcast and the little bits that we're doing here and there with some gaming and things like that, that's it. And I am looking forward to having Dr. Peterson join us for some gaming. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Hopefully sooner.
You're gonna be GMing that, if I recall.
I'm going to GM it, and we probably will stay D&D, but yeah, I'll GM that.
Yeah.
So you could
fully
start
intent on. I'm fully intent on being a bard for this.
Oh, it's gonna be so good. That's gonna be so much fun.
And I am absolutely prepared to take the brunt of the revenge on your part for what I've put your characters through. So I have created a list of one-liners.
Oh no.
That the bard can use, that we can't necessarily record on a podcast. But if you can think of Scanlan,
I am.
Legend of Vox Machina, that's kind of in the same vein, minus some of the gratuitous adult themes that sometimes occur in the episode.
Right. So. You're just gonna randomly yell Bradley's hand while we're playing.
I love that show.
And poor Aaron is not going to have any idea. I recommended he watch it and I mean this, I recommended he watch The Legend of Vox Machina as prep to acquaint himself. But yeah, it's such a good show. Before we go,
my son and I watched last weekend. We went to a Friday night showing of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
Yeah, we saw it too.
Yeah. And you probably saw this as one of the previews, they had Dungeons and Dragons, the movie.
It's really looking good. I'm really curious.
My son, I was anxious to see what his reaction was going to be once they said it was Dungeons and Dragons, because Chris Pine's in it.
Yep.
And he actually said to me that he'd go watch it. And I'm very lucky. My 19-year-old son is a fantasy hound. He goes to movies with me like this. Yep. He said he would go because my wife sure is my name is Brad, will not.
Yep. Nope.
But I am excited to see that movie.
I really am. I might be unrealistically optimistic, but the clips they're showing, they've got the classic D&D party where everyone's playing their roles really well, really traditional. Man, does that look funny.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. What an excellent place to close. All right, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us for yet another episode. Stay tuned. Next episode, we will have Malcolm Sheppard back, and we're going to get into a topic that has been a point of discussion for Brad and me for, the past month or more. We're really glad to have someone like Malcolm walk us through and kind of explore the thought space around it. So, you know the deal. Be well, stay well. We will see you in a couple of weeks.